How's it going, everyone? Today we are going to be discussing the digestive system. So we're going to talk about the different organs and the different enzymes and the different materials that are used to break down our food. I do want to note that being that this is a 2000 level exercise science and health science course, that I'm probably going to skip over a lot of the detail for the digestive system, but I'm going to really try to focus on the specific organs, their functions, and what role they play in digestion. And so a lot of the, I guess you could say, the molecular processes and the certain types of cells and the different types of cells, not that they're not important, but I'm just not going to be emphasizing those in this particular video. So the digestive tract is this one long tube from the start of our mouth out to the other side, and in the process there are many organs that are going to help break down the foods and liquids that we consume, and then we're going to take those nutrients and deliver them throughout the body. And so we're going to talk all about today those different organs and their functions. So here's a look at our digestive tract. Again, this is a long continuous tube from the mouth heading down. The food will head down the esophagus into the stomach, and then whatever is passing through is going to go through the small intestines, and then the large intestines before leaving the body. But we'll talk also a little bit about these other organs, including the liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder, and their roles in digestion. We have 6 different digestive processes, and I want you guys to make sure that you know what these 6 different processes are. And so once we first take in food and liquid, we will chew it and swallow it, and so that is called ingestion. And then as food makes its way down the GI tract, there are going to be certain glands that release digestive enzymes, and these digestive enzymes are going to help break down this food further. And so those the release of those digestive enzymes are called secretion. And then as it makes its way down the GI tract, smooth muscle is going to contract and help mix and basically move all these particles down the GI tract. And so that mixing, that contraction pattern, that is called motility. And what happens is that when larger food particles come into contact with digestive enzymes, those enzymes are going to help break down large food particles into smaller food particles, and that's called digestion. And so specifically, that would be chemical digestion, as opposed to what the teeth do, which is mechanical digestion. And then those small food particles are absorbed into the bloodstream and then delivered to different cells of the body. And then finally, we get rid of all the materials that we don't need through defecation. So we talked about the autonomic nervous system in previous chapters, but the one part of the autonomic nervous system I kind of glossed over was the enteric nervous system. And there's roughly or near 100 million neurons in the enteric nervous system. And the enteric nervous system is going to play a role in smooth muscle contraction throughout the digestive tract, the release of certain digestive enzymes, and the activity of certain glands. And so this enteric nervous system is it is going to regulate our digestive processes. And these digestive processes are going to be more, active during rest periods, that parasympathetic dominance, while, during fight or flight response, things like exercise, we're going to have less activity in the digestive system. And then we'll also have, the enteric nervous system is going to have, connections through certain receptors, mechanoreceptors, chemoreceptors, to carry out certain reflexes. So maybe when there's stretching throughout the GI tract, this will cause the contraction of smooth muscle or the release of certain enzymes to help break down food. But the enteric nervous system is going to play a huge role in our digestive processes. We have smooth muscle that surrounds our gastrointestinal tract, and this smooth muscle is going to be responsible for helping push food along through our gastrointestinal system, and also it's going to help mix up that food and help break it down within our different digestive organs. But the movement of food through the gastrointestinal tract is going to be due to the contraction of this smooth muscle. And smooth muscle throughout the GI tract has this autorhythmicity. So it is going to contract due to these cells called interstitial cells of Cajal, which create depolarizations that create patterns of contraction throughout our GI tract. And we're going to talk about two of those patterns of motility, two of those contraction patterns called peristalsis and segmentation. So first, peristalsis you'll see more so in the esophagus. So when we chew and digest food, that food that we take in, that softer food now material we call a bolus is going to enter the esophagus, and as that food enters the esophagus, it creates a stretch across the walls of the GI tract. And then what will occur is, because of that stretch, these smooth muscles are going to then contract. And what that does is helps push the food along through the esophagus here. And so as the segment of smooth muscle here contracts, the food moves along, and then that section will relax. And that's how it gets pushed through our digestive system. But we also have what's called segmentation, and you see this more so in the small intestine. And these are alternating patterns of contraction. And so what's going to occur is that you get sort of this mixing and together food particles and segments will form and then disappear. And so this alternating contraction, again, is called segmentation. But both of these patterns of motility are responsible for moving food along and helping to digest food materials. So first, we take in food, obviously through the mouth. Our teeth are going to help grind up this food. And then we also have, the tongue, the palate, to help with the breakdown of food and the ingestion of food. And so the cheeks and the lips will help keep food in during chewing. The palate is going to prevent any food from entering the nasal cavity. The tongue is going to help push that food down towards the pharynx and the esophagus. And then we also have salivary glands that create saliva. And within that saliva is going to be certain enzymes that are going to help chemically break down these food particles. And so one in particular that I want you guys to memorize is called salivary amylase. Breaking down the term here, it's in the saliva. And amylase has to deal with the digestion of carbohydrates. And so we have this chemical digestion taking place because of our saliva, but then too, the teeth are creating this mechanical digestion in order to break down food. So obviously we chew food and then swallow it, and so that food from the mouth will enter our pharynx, which is the place that the food will enter before entering the esophagus. And the esophagus is basically this tube connecting the mouth and the stomach. And so as we chew and swallow food, there is this ring of smooth muscle up top called a sphincter. And when it relaxes, that allows food to enter the esophagus. And then through peristalsis, again, that food will make its way down the esophagus before entering the border of the stomach, where a lower esophageal sphincter is. And once relaxed, that food will then enter the stomach for further digestion. Again, just to review the process, we will chew food and then swallow it. That food becomes a softer, more manageable material that we call a bolus. And so as that bolus makes its way down from the pharynx to the esophagus, it's going to undergo peristalsis. Again, the contraction of smooth muscle in order to then reach the stomach. And once this lower esophageal sphincter relaxes, that food will enter the stomach for further digestion. So the stomach is this J-shaped organ that helps hold the food, and it's going to basically mix it all together with gastric juices that we have to further break down and digest this food that we consumed. It is a middle ground between the esophagus and the small intestine, and that small intestine, we're going to see in a little bit, is where the absorption takes place for the most part. But we, in the stomach, it has this basically these patterns of contraction, again, to help break down food and make sure that it can go along. And the three main regions of the stomach are called the fundus, the body, and the antrum. Here we can see a further breakdown of the stomach and the different sections. We have these grooves in our stomach called rugae. And, within those grooves, you're going to have certain cells which secrete certain things that help break down materials further within the stomach. Hydrochloric acid is going to make up that gastric juice, which is used to break down materials within the stomach. And then we also get the release of certain enzymes. Pepsinogen is going to help break down proteins. Gastric lipase, so again, this is just describing that we're in the stomach, so gastric. Lipase, the prefix here, that we're going to be breaking down lipids, so amylase, breakdown of carbohydrates, lipase, breaking down lipids, fats, and then, we're going to talk all throughout this lecture about different ones that break up proteins as well. But anyway, we have these cells that release certain materials which help break down food, and then we also have muscle that is going to help contract, churn this food all together, help break it down, help mix it with these gastric juices and these enzymes to further digest these materials. In order to mechanically digest food and break it down further, we have two patterns of contraction or movement of food. So that would be propulsion, which is the forward movement of food, trying to move it forward to the small intestine. And then we have retropulsion, which is basically a splashback of gastric contents that are too large to make its way to the small intestine. And this is just going to help further break down materials to ensure that they can be digested to their smallest parts, and then further absorbed later on down through the digestive system. So again, gastric juice is going to contain this hydrochloric acid, which is very acidic. It's going to, break down these foods chemically. And then within that, gastric juice, we're going to have enzymes. Pepsin is a protein digestion enzyme. So, that's one of many that are throughout our gastrointestinal system. And then again, we discussed this one and covered it quickly, but gastric lipase is going to help with the breakdown of lipids. There are a few different enzymes that are used to break down proteins. Pepsin, trypsin, chymotrypsin, and elastase are going to break down these peptide bonds into smaller peptides. And then aminopeptidase and carboxypeptidase can convert these smaller peptides into individual amino acids that can later on be absorbed and transported to different cells of the body. The pancreas is going to be a very important organ that releases digestive enzymes into the small intestine. And so it's going to create its own pancreatic juice that is released into the small intestine in order to further break down and further digest food. Some of the enzymes that are located within that pancreatic juice are pancreatic amylase. So again, amylase, breakdown of carbohydrates. It's produced in the pancreas, so pancreatic amylase. Trypsin, chymotrypsin, elastase are going to help break down different proteins. Pancreatic lipase, so again, breaking down lipids. Ribonuclease, so, we talk about nucleic acid, so RNA, and then deoxyribonuclease, so all that RNA and DNA that are within the food materials that we eat are broken down by those enzymes. Here we can see where the pancreas sits. It is going to border the small intestines, and again, it's just going to have these different ducts that help release these pancreatic juices and these different digestive enzymes into the small intestine so we can further break down food, and that's going to help then absorb the materials later on. The liver is the largest gland in the body, and it has many different functions that are going to play a role in our metabolism and digestion. In particular, it secretes bile, which is used to emulsify fats. And as we look at the liver, you can see that it has many blood pathways that are going to enter, because the liver is very important when it comes to the metabolism of different materials and the filtering out of certain materials within our bodies. So, some of the functions include carbohydrate metabolism, maintaining blood glucose levels, the storage of glycogen and the synthesis of glycogen, and also the synthesis of triglycerides as well. It plays a role in storing triglycerides, breaking down fatty acids, and synthesizing materials like lipoproteins and cholesterol. It also plays a role in protein metabolism. It's going to help deaminate amino acids that then could be used for energy production or ATP production. It plays a huge role in detoxifying our blood. So, that's why physicians will say to avoid high alcohol or drug use to prevent damage of the liver. It helps get rid of bilirubin, which is a product when we have old erythrocytes that are broken down. Synthesis, again, of bile salts that are used for the emulsification and the absorption of lipids. In addition, storage, like we said, of glycogen, certain vitamins and minerals plays a huge role in the phagocytosis of old or damaged cells, including those red blood cells, erythrocytes, leukocytes, the white blood cells, and certain material, and also the activation of vitamin D. The gallbladder is going to be responsible for storing bile. So it doesn't synthesize it, but the bile that was synthesized by the liver will be stored within the gallbladder. Most of the absorption that takes place in the gastrointestinal tract is going to take place in the small intestine. So most digestion and absorption of nutrients occur within the small intestines. It has three different regions: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. And here we're going to see that, again, we are going to get a release of pancreatic juice that enters the small intestine, and also some bile. Those materials that enter the small intestines are going to be broken down further and then absorbed into the bloodstream. The small intestine also has its own intestinal juice, which is composed of water, mucus, and different ions. Again, it's going to receive certain pancreatic juice and bile from the pancreas and the liver. And within the small intestines, we have what's called brush border enzymes. And so what occurs is that we have these different sections, these microvilli within the small intestine. And as materials brush up against these microvilli, there are enzymes that are going to help break down proteins, that are going to help break down different carbohydrates. And that is going to assist in, again, just the breakdown of our food, so that it could be then absorbed into the bloodstream. Within the small intestine, we are going to have mechanical digestion via segmentation, which we discussed earlier. So those smooth muscles are going to help break down these food materials. And then these enzymes and the different chyme, the pancreatic juice, the intestinal juice, the bile is going to help also break down these food materials. And then these nutrients are going to be, again, absorbed into the bloodstream. So those different materials can be transported to different cells and then used for certain functions. The large intestine is where everything that hasn't been absorbed is going to enter, and the movement of the leftover materials is going to make its way through the large intestine and eventually form feces. We're going to get some absorption of water and ions, but basically this is where the feces are formed, and that mechanical digestion is going to help move these materials through the large intestine. But then we also have chemical digestion, and the large intestine is unique because there are billions upon billions of bacteria that live within your large intestine. And I would encourage you to read up on the recent research about this gut flora, as we call it, or the microbiome, because it turns out that what we eat has an impact on these gut bacteria. And that, in turn, the things that are released through that chemical digestion by the bacteria has an impact on our health. So it's an expanding field of research to talk about the gut flora and how it impacts our health, whether it be cardiovascularly or other components. But it's very interesting because we have these bacteria, billions of them again, that live in our body, and their activity will impact our health. So as we discussed, the activity of our gastrointestinal system, our digestive system, is going to be regulated by neurons. It's going to depend on whether we're in a parasympathetic state or sympathetic state, and also the activity of the enteric nervous system. There are certain reflexes that occur because of either chemo reflexes or mechanical reflexes that can aid in digestion. In addition, we have hormones that help regulate our digestive system, including CCK, cholecystokinin, which is going to help in the release of bile from the liver into the small intestine, secretin, which also helps in the release of bile and also the release of pancreatic juice into the small intestine, and then ghrelin, sometimes called the hunger hormone, because it is going to increase our appetite and therefore increase our food intake. Before we end, I want to discuss lipoproteins because they have impacts as far as our health is concerned. And these lipoproteins are how we transport certain lipids such as cholesterol throughout the bloodstream. And you've probably heard of LDL, low density lipoproteins, and HDL, high-density lipoproteins. And again, these are markers typically used to assess someone's vascular health because we want to try to avoid what is called atherosclerosis, which is the buildup of plaque within our blood vessels, because the buildup of plaque can cause some serious consequences such as heart attack or stroke. They will block blood flow to certain cells of the body, and that could cause cell death and damage, which is obviously negative. So physicians and health professionals alike will keep an eye on these LDL and HDL and total cholesterol levels. LDL has traditionally been termed the bad cholesterol. And so, we want to try to limit LDL, and high-density lipoprotein is considered the good cholesterol. And the reason why I'm sitting here putting it in quotes is because, there has been some debate amongst this. But here we'll talk about sort of the implications of each and why LDL is considered bad and why HDL is considered good. So the reason why LDL is considered this bad cholesterol is because when you have LDL in increased concentrations, that means there's likely going to be an increased amount of LDL oxidation. And what the oxidation of LDL leads to is the creation of foam cells. And this is going to increase inflammation, and it's going to increase atherosclerosis again, which is very negative as far as vascular health is concerned, because if it gets too extreme, it could lead to heart attack, stroke, blockages, cell death, which is all very negative. And so the reason why HDL is considered this positive cholesterol is because it helps to decrease that LDL oxidation and helps to improve endothelial function. So typically we want to measure the HDL, the LDL, and cholesterol in our blood because it gives us an idea of that vascular health and that level of atherosclerosis within our bodies. And so when we talk about cardiovascular disease risk factors, we want to keep LDL under 130 milligrams per deciliter of blood. We want to keep HDL above 40 milligrams per deciliter above, but even better if it could be above 60. And we want to keep total cholesterol under 200. So again, these markers are used by health professionals and physicians in order to evaluate someone's cardiovascular health. So that's it for the digestive system. We talked all about the different organs of the digestive system and their different functions, and we talked about the different phases of digestion and how we break down food and how we absorb the nutrients that are formed through that breakdown process. And this is just how we will, break down the different nutrients that we need and how we absorb it into the body so different cells can use it. And that concludes the human physiology course. I want you guys to remember that this is an introductory course, and believe it or not, even though we've spent hours talking about the different functions and the different systems in our body, we really just scratch the surface when it comes to all these functions. So I hope you guys continue to study. I hope you guys continue to research all these, different functions throughout the body and how the body behaves, because it has huge implications as far as your work, as far as health, as far as exercise is concerned, as far as sports performance, strength and conditioning, physical therapy. All of these different things break down to how our body behaves. And so again, we just scratched the surface, but I hope you continue to learn more. And again, I just want to thank you guys for sitting and paying attention throughout all of this. And I wish you guys the best of luck in the future.